You're, it's not gonna, you're gonna enjoy me coughing. That'll be my intro as me. Um, okay, well, by gosh, by golly, it says we are live, so we are gonna plunge right in. So I am Kat Udero, psychic empath and psychic wrangler and celestial medium. And this show of Third Eye Salon, we take the veils and we just drop them. We look through what we've been told, what we've been given as the norm, what we've been told is truth, and we see, feel, know, experience what is so far beyond that. Today, we're going to do that with the one and only guy, Steven Needler, as we look beyond source and then into origin and then beyond origin. And what's beyond that, we're going to find out. Guy is working on a new book, so we are so very excited to have him here with us today. And I'm going to flip us into Brady Bunch view so I can toss the mic to Miss Linda. And Miss Linda, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Hello, everybody. And I am so excited to further our conversation with Guy. I've been listening to his audiobook because I think I'd be so lost reading his book because it's like, I love listening to the audiobook. So you're going to enjoy this conversation. I hope you had a chance to watch the first one. If you haven't, go back and watch it because it was amazing. We're going to continue on with even more depth and in new directions today. I am your live stream chat host. And as always, my policy is to play nice or get out because we just don't have room for anything other than love in this environment. And be sure to share your experiences, your questions. Put a question mark in there so I see it. And this is live, so you get to ask questions of Guy. That is so cool. So make sure that you do that. Take advantage of this. Please like the button, hit the like button, share, subscribe, and check out our podcast on the other channels. Even if you don't normally go there and like the channels, like the shows. Let a couple of them run through. It really helps with the algorithm. And we really appreciate if you do that because that helps get us more followers on our programs and more enlightened people to enjoy our conversations. And if you're interested in working directly with any of us, the links are below. And don't forget to donate if you can, and if you can't, the likes and shares are just as important. Those links are also below. And if you haven't also, join us in our Facebook group so that we can continue the conversation there. With that, welcome, Guy. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be able to communicate with people, not just face to face, but across the world. And thank you for sharing your salon with me.
Our absolute pleasure. And let's also say hello to Jason Adkins. He's got this artwork behind him that he has been holding space for. He's an artist. He is a psychic medium. He will bring your ET-kin to virtual life. I don't know how you say that on the canvas and paper. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing well. I'm ready to channel my inner sponge to absorb all of the information and hopefully retain it and dissect it throughout the day and probably the next couple of weeks. The first interview was amazing. Like I'm sitting here and I'm listening. I'm like, that makes sense. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know if I understand that. Like it was so much information, like it took me a couple of days to really kind of process it. So I'm fascinated to have a part two. And I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Jason. There was definitely moments where it was like you're traveling light speed to keep up with the information as it's coming in. And other times it would just start to swirl and it would go into like a Doctor Who, and it was like, okay, we just have to let that one go and focus on where the energy is taking us because the energy is so rich with information. So with that, please do give us a thumbs up and a like if you're excited to, like Linda was saying, it helps so much. And if you're excited to hear what Guy has to say about his experiences beyond source and beyond origin. And normally at this point, I would read the bio, but we are running a little late. It's 11:11 my time, so it's a perfect time to just hop in. And we have also, the bio is in the description box, but we had Mr. Guy on before, so hopefully you know who he is by now. One thing I did want to ask you, Guy, was what was your process as you were coming into kind of starting on a personal note? Because I think a lot of people are waking up right now and they're coming into their own and they're figuring out who they are. And as you were doing that, I remember hearing you in an interview, like where your mom was kind of dismissive of you in some occasions. I'm wondering, how did you manage to know that what you were experiencing was valid, and that and the people who were like, oh, you're going too far up in these levels, you need to calm it down, you need to stay in these levels, where are you going? How did you trust yourself beyond all the other voices that were around you?
I just knew. I mean, when I was younger, before I sort of went into my sort of second awakening, so to speak, I sort of came into this incarnation with lots of knowingness and sort of strange, bizarre thoughts for a young boy, and then the young sort of man, so to speak. And when I was at school, I'd speak about things, and the information would just come into me. And later on, if you looked at it on, we hadn't got the internet then, of course, but we looked at it in books and those sorts of things. We find out that it was true, which was really interesting. But most people I interacted with thought I was just weird. Coming from a completely different location. They even said, "Oh, you're from a different planet, you are." I mean, they were joking, but of course, we don't come from different planets. We come from a higher level of frequency where our true energetic selves or higher selves are. But it was just a knowingness that what I was doing was right, and what I was experiencing was right. And then that was sort of confirmed with this waking meditation I had, where I was meditating after sort of being asleep in the morning, and then these four entities sort of appeared in my space, so to speak, and told me that what you are doing is right, and what you're experiencing is true, and what you're trying to research into is also the truth, but it's not the right time. And then going back into being sort of not totally the average human being, but mostly, but with still one eye on spiritual, metaphysical things, but not to the same level of depth and detail that I was in, was my way of sort of absorbing and being part of and understanding where I am, on this planet. And it was only when I was basically bullied into going to a Reiki share by another student who was doing part of an MBA with me, but I started to think, okay, this is more like me, and it sort of felt right again. There was no sort of worry about whether my mom was trying to reprogram me, because most people would have done the same thing. Any parent usually says, don't be stupid. There is no sort of person by the side of you. Your invisible friend doesn't exist. It's just in your head. Well, actually, it's not. It's that they're there. And they may well be, elementals or nature spirits. They may be other entities that are incarnate but a higher frequency, or there may be, seeing astral entities, those sorts of things, or even communicating with disincarnate entities as well that are above the astral levels, because they don't experience it themselves. So what they don't experience themselves doesn't exist. Now, with all that, although we've got belief systems, usually the belief systems and our attraction to belief systems or agreements with belief systems are based upon the things that we gravitate towards, that feel right intuitively to us. We may not have experienced it ourselves, but we believe it to be true because A, it sits right with us, and also B, we give credence to certain sort of authority figures who are broadcasting the information. So really, when I read different books, for example, I read Eric von Däniken books, devoured those. That sort of told me that my feelings about humanity has been around for a lot longer than what we know as being sort of history. They're calling things prehistory now, or even was it BCE? There's all sorts of these different things now, and it just felt right. Just to summarize, it just felt right. And every time I started to progress and become more capable, even though I was being, with the healing, I was being told off for being uncontrolled, in terms of where I was going with frequentially to do the healing. I sort of felt that there was a way of getting there in a structured way, and that's what I eventually did. I created this structure that I now teach as well to people, to be able to move my sentience into these different levels that we normally exist within when we disincarnate, and providing that level of structure helped me to be there. But structure is only a function. It's only like a ladder that we use to be able to allow us to experience these different things in a logical and a repeatable and robust way. Once we've gone past the structure, we can just go there, and everything starts to become structureless. So the structure is basically our sort of low frequency way of creating this ability to connect, because we need structure, because everything is structured, everything is physical, everything's got a reason. Whereas, basically everything exists concurrently. So the reason and the whys and the wherefores are already there because they're all existing concurrently. And so it became familiar and natural. And even though my father didn't understand me, he understood it as being, well, I can see that you've got the potential to make a career out of it later. And my mother sort of had a little bit of spirituality in her because she liked to use homeopathics. So from a mother's side, although she was trying to make me into what you would expect a son to be, which is a human being who was going to work hard with their studies, work hard at work, and become a sort of model citizen. And she didn't like the idea that there was something else going on in the background. But it just didn't worry me. And I always thought that there was always something wrong with just being immersed in our incarnation, just thinking that the human body was what we are. And I've had these feelings ever since. I think the first time I felt it and understood it was around 4, I think. So it became natural, and that's the most important thing for people. Is that if it feels natural and it feels right, then it is right. Sometimes, if we have raw ability to be able to connect in these different locations, that's okay. But sometimes that raw ability needs to be trained, which is what I ended up doing to allow me to create a way in which I could share my abilities with others and help them progress and evolve at the same time and move beyond the cage or the prison that is the human body, because it's only temporary anyway, but it's so compelling that we tend to experientially know, although it's not, it's an incorrect knowledge, that we are the human body because we're not. And so I've sort of basically just continued and to some extent ignored people's sort of basically taking the mickey out of me, making fun out of me, and I just continued. I learned to only communicate with those who were on the same level, basically, or around the same level, and that was how I tended to move on, and not ended up being, the stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of saying that, a stranger in a strange land. I have a question about the mapping and what you've experienced with that, but I wanted to see if Linda or Jason had a question before, in terms of knowing who you are.
Go ahead, Jason. I'll ask one of you.
So first and foremost, I love the fact that you honor the fact that you just knew, right? You knew it to be. These are experiences that are happening to me. And you talked about having these moments of this like raw ability, right? So, for a lot of us, especially for people that are just kind of starting their journey, they may have these spontaneous like moments where they're, that raw ability just kind of shows itself. And then you stated that, you trained that raw ability so you could use it to the benefit of others. What does that training process look like?
It just came intuitively, basically. Yeah. I mean, the first part was opening the chakras to enable me to heal the body, because I obviously went through a healing college, to enable me to heal the parts of the bodies that were part of specific frequencies associated with those chakras, such as the energy templates and the waste product of the chakras pulling in energy to animate, to energize energy templates, which is the human aura, these various different levels. So once I got that little bit of structure, everything else just sort of came. And I have to say that I didn't get it right first time. It was a case of, I'll try this and see what happens there, and I'll try that, and I had about a number of different visualization-based processes that I used to use to get to certain levels. And initially, those processes were really slow. I mean, you get bored and walk away, basically sort of slowness. It would take me at least half an hour, 3/4 of an hour to get to any level, and then another sort of 3/4 of an hour to come down again. Which only gave me about 5 or 10 minutes there. But in those 5 or 10 minutes, I used to get so much information, because I used to car share with my late wife Anne, and we used to discuss what I picked up in meditation. She used to meditate as well. We used to discuss what we both experienced, and I'd share what I got. And she said, "Well, it's amazing, because that's just 10 minutes," and it ended up being, basically almost 1,000 words of information. So I started to journal it. And that's what ended up creating the first book, The History of God. But it's a case of I truly believe, well, I truly know, actually, rather than believe, that I was being given information as to how to start and what to do, and to then therefore to hone and modify and augment and improve what I was doing to get to these different frequential levels faster. And so, although the structured way I had was actually in error first, only because I made it decimalized. I put it from 0 to 100, and I then found out it wasn't like that. It was something else. It allowed me to progress in if not specifically the right direction, a similar direction. So rather than being sort of straight up in my understanding, I sort of went that way at first, which wasn't the wrong way, because it was going upwards, but diagonally upwards. So but I was given intuitively, and I knew intuitively that I had to do certain things. And when I got to that, it's like, oh, I understand this now, and this concept comes into it. Oh, wow, perhaps I can use that instead, that method instead. So I started to use these different methods. So I feel I was given the information intuitively as a function of the level of connectedness I was achieving. And as I achieved more connectedness, or increased my communicative bandwidth, if you want to call it that, I started to become more capable of understanding where I was, and therefore the clarity of where I was and how to get there became more and more detailed. And so that's what really happened. It was sort of really organic, if you want to call it that.
One of the things that you are really convey is that you went through this with a psyche of curiosity versus judgment. I know when I explored my abilities, I was so concerned about getting it right that I had like test anxiety. Every time I would do it, it's like, it's got to be 100% right, or I'm just a fraud. And I think one of the best things that somebody told me was to just play. Just play. Have that curiosity and play. And that's kind of what I hear you is like, I got this far and it was like, oh, I need to adjust. I learned this. Let's try this now. Let's try this. And I think that's such great advice. As you were talking about kind of reality as you know it, when you talk about us here in this life, and you talk about everything else that you're involved in, this is kind of I'm not even sure I'm going to say this right, this question, but how close does everything else feel? Is it all here, all now? Or does it feel like you have to go to some different level to reach that? Are you always part of that now in your psyche?
The answer is yes. But basically, at first, it was a case of going through a mechanical process, going through the structured methodology of going to these different levels. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that rather than me going to these different levels, which ended up being basically different universal environments within a multiversal environment, eventually it felt like it was coming to me. So everything's in the same space. And rather than compartmentalizing and saying, I'm going to this particular universe now, or this particular frequency, which supports a different universal environment, it was just all one environment. So at some point I was going there, and I have to teach it this way. You go to this level, you go to this level, you go to this level. Eventually, the students also experience this complete communion with themselves and their environment, and so that they and their environment become one. And there is no compartmentalization, because the compartmentalization is our low frequency way of understanding it, the structured way, whereas really it's completely formless or amorphous. And in some respects, this formlessness is something that Eckhart Tolle talks about. He talks about everything being formless, about being in the now and beingness. And I feel that he was trying to explain something without giving the structure first, and therefore, although he had a lot of followers, I mean, and he still does. He's an excellent teacher. Without the structured part of the first, without the foundation that we can work with, that has either metaphors or examples or stories or other forms of structure that allows us to create this foundation to be able to say, okay, I understood that, and then I understand that, and then I understand that, and that, and that, and that, which gets me to that. Just teaching that doesn't work for the vast majority of people. We have to go through a level of understanding. I mean, for example, when we're connected, if we have a question, we already have the answer because everything's already there. But if you had a mathematical question and you just had the answer, people would say it's either wrong, or they'd have to go through the mathematical routine to get to the answer to say, actually, that's right. How did you find that out? Oh, it just came to me. They would, and they'd struggle with that because they don't have the understanding that we're all connected concurrently. And so to answer the question about, am I connected concurrently? The answer is yes, but I choose to focus on various different things to be able to navigate around this incarnation as well. So there's always my intuition or my, to use the old terminology, clairsentience, if you want to call it that, is always connected. And so I'm always using it and trusting it, or do my best to trust it. But I have to focus on being here. And focusing on being here also means that I don't focus on where I really am. Although a lot of people would tell you that I'm not grounded because I'm always sort of there. But I'm always sort of trying to focus on two areas. But mostly when I'm, for instance, doing this interview now between you all, I'm having to be focused here. So it is a case of we're all connected, but we just don't tune into the right the right radio station, so to speak. But if we're connected to all the radio stations concurrently, then to be able to pick up one particular radio station, we have to focus on that, and so a radio station in that example is where we are now. So yeah, it's always connected, but I have to focus to be here.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, that's part of being multidimensional, right? Like once you realize you're part of all of it, then you get to play the person that you are versus being burdened by the person that you are. I like the idea that we do need this structure. And then once you learn the structure, it's like once you've learned how to take the stairs, you can take the elevator. Once you've learned how to take the elevator, then you can teleport. like these are these things that we have to get through psychologically in order to say, oh yeah, I can do it. Oh, I could do it anytime. But once we understand it, then we kind of like we let go of the railings that we need for our psychology to be able to move forward. So it's very compassionate to have those railings, and that's a beautiful work that you're doing.
And once you learn how to teleport, you start to realize that you're everywhere at once.
that you're teleporting everywhere all the time because you're all of it.
Well, our existence is everywhere at once. And one of the things from a theoretical physics perspective, and is in the book that's just released called The Arm, is I found out there's something called quantum latency. And quantum latency is that everything that's certainly within the physical universe, the different frequential levels, and not just, and that's also includes the multiverse. Everything has the capability of being everything. All we have to do is focus on it. So in essence, this mobile phone, for example, can you see? Oh, there we go. It could be a chair. Should I decide to focus on it being a chair? Because the quantum latency is it is everything at once. But right now, it's just focused on being a phone.
So you say that, but I'm like, in terms of practical terms, because you can't really go about, I suppose you can, maybe you can, who am I to say? In terms of transforming that phone into a chair. And I guess what you're saying is that, like, within that space where everything is all things, well, this actually makes me think of Susie Hansen, where up on the ships with her grays, they were showing her formlessness, and they would go and they would dissolve their bodies, and they would reappear like, oh, do you want me to be a pencil? I can turn my form into a pencil. And so you're actually just saying exactly what experiencers have experienced. I love it when these threads connect. I wonder if there's any NDEers that have ever, because you've done all of this mapping, and I'm wondering if there are any parallels that you found with people who are NDEers or other like esoteric maps. Like, is your mapping, can you lay it, as it were, cross hatch it against another person's map and say parallels?
There are. If we decide to look into it, different books that have been written by people, even like they're 100 years old, and other people that are quite recent, who've explained things in certain ways, and it's just their way of understanding it. When I look at it, I think, yeah, okay, that's the same as what I've understood, but it's being explained in a different way. And the thing is that it's still good. It's still good information, but there's not many people who can say, okay, that's the same as that, and that's the same as that, and that's the same as that. It's all the same thing, but it's just got different words associated with it. Most individuals look at it and go, okay, that's right and that's wrong, because we're in a dualistic state here. Everything is positive, negative, up and down, left and right, forwards and backwards. But when we recognize that, actually, depending upon how we interact with our environment and the circumstances within the environment and the people within it, for example, and the entities within it, and therefore how our expansiveness is, we then start to recognize that although there's lots of different words to explain the same thing, it's still one thing. It's like the plethora of languages we've got on the planet right now. They have, for a teacup, we've got probably hundreds of different ways of saying a teacup, but it's still a teacup. And so when we start, and this is the same with religions and how they've evolved. At the end of the day, it all goes back to the same thing. It's still the one thing, but linking it in with what somebody else has said, for example, means that we have to go above it and go, okay, let's look at it with a helicopter view. What they're saying is this. How does that relate to this text or that text or that text or that text? And once we start to understand that these different texts mean the same thing, sometimes they don't, of course. Sometimes it can be complete nonsense. But for really high quality individuals, who are channelers, for instance, or mediums, or psychic authors, for example, you can see that they're seeing it in a slightly different way, but it's the same thing, and that's interesting. There was a book by Yogi Ramachara, and it was written. Well, he's written loads of books, written in the late 19th century, And I was given some of these books to read. I haven't still. I bought the books on ABE Books, which is a worldwide bookstore. They have lots of out-of-print books. And I got I managed to get the original prints, the hard copies. And I was just writing about the ebb and flow of the multiverse and how the source goes through an evolutionary cycle and how it works. And then I just quite randomly just picked up this book and thought, oh, I'll flick through a book, and I was drawn to this page, and it explained exactly the same thing, but in a slightly different way. I thought, this guy's an advanced yogi, and he's written exactly what I've just picked up without even looking at the book. And I've put the books down. I've not read them. Not read them since, because I'm a bit concerned that, you know, it goes in there subliminally, and, you know, 10 years time it comes out as a book, and, you know, you think you're channeling it yourself. But when I finish my books, I'll start to indulge myself in reading these books, because they obviously got a lot of hidden old ancient truths in there. It's a lot of the Hindu texts do. But yeah, it's interesting to see that the real truth is there, and there are lots of different ways to explain it, and you just know when it's right, and you think, okay, that means that, and that means that. What we need is a spiritual Rosetta Stone that says, okay, this is what that is, and this author's written about it and explains it in this way, and this author's written about it and explains it in this way, and this author's written about it and explains it in this way. That's what we want.
Yeah, I think that's genius, because I think that is really what I see, you know, is parallels and mirrors and fractals all the time, because that is what this is. It's all oneness. And so I think having a Rosetta Stone, again, for that structural level, for people who need that in order for it to click and align, and for them to be able to see the oneness within all of these mappings, again, reaffirms that this is source calling to itself over and over again, saying, remember me, I'm you. Remember you, I'm me, you know? And I think that that's where I want to go into this talk about the source beings and returning to source. I wanted to say, because that's something that's I've really been tuning into psychically, empathically, and feeling that whole, like when these waves of energy come and I can feel there's a bunch you can tune into on that side of it. And I'm wondering, how does this, before we talk about all the 12 sources and go to origin, how does source calling itself back into itself, how is that impacting the physical nature of Earth, weather patterns, people's behavior, you know, global patterns of any type? How does oneness impact the physicality of Earth, of Gaia coming back into source?
Well, we're a long way from the end of the current evolutionary cycle, so it doesn't really matter too much. But in terms of the Earth itself, the Earth is one of a number of bodies, and you can see them out of your telescope, that are basically pan-frequential. However, there's not many that actually go through all the frequencies. Some of them are manifest on the first three, where we are now, we call 3D. Those first three frequencies, and they continue for another few frequencies, and then they stop being manifest. Whereas the Earth is totally pan-frequential in terms of it exists on all the frequencies associated with the physical universe.
Pan-frequential. What is pan-frequential, sir?
Pan-frequential means it. Pan is a Greek word. It means across, basically. Yeah, across everything. So it means it's the only planet that is totally that is manifest on every frequency associated with the physical universe. There's other planets that exist from the 5th frequency upwards, or the 7th frequency upwards, or the 8th frequency upwards, and there's a lot that exists in the first 3, and then the next one, the 4th or the 5th, and then don't manifest. So it's a rarity, and it's because it's a rarity. It is one of the planets where we've got individualized free will, because we can start to potentially progress through all of the frequential levels as part of our evolutionary progression by the use of incarnation.
Fascinating. I want to talk about that, but I'm going to try to resist. Go ahead, sir. What do you want to say?
But in terms of the weather, I mean, basically the weather is being affected in three ways, really. First, there's the increase or decrease in frequency associated with our collective evolutionary progression whilst we're incarnate. So we're coming down the frequencies a little bit, so we're starting to experience more weather. When we were going up the frequencies, the Earth was becoming more temperate, and the weather changes were very small. Now we've dropped down the frequencies a little bit, and you can see around the world how we're interacting with each other while we're dropping down the frequencies. We're starting to get more and more sort of severe weather, severe droughts, severe forest fires, bushfires, severe rainfall. We're getting floods and things, earthquakes, etc., etc. This is because we're moving up and down the frequencies so quickly, it's causing an issue. But on top of that, there's a mechanical function of the planet in how it moves within the solar system, and how the solar system moves within the location that it is within the galaxy, and where the galaxy is within the universe. Because we're moving up and down, because we move in and out of different frequential states. There's locally high levels of frequency and locally low levels of frequency, and that can be really small. So we can move in and out of these on Earth, but they can also be basically galaxy sized or planetary system sized. And when we move in and out of these, this is what sometimes affects us in terms of our personalities, how the frequencies affect us. And we call those our horoscope, basically. How I'm Taurus, or you're a Sagittarius, or you're an Aries, or you're a Pisces, etc. Because we're affected by the frequential levels that we incarnate into the body into at that particular time. So from a mechanical perspective, this affects the Earth because we've got two things happen. One, the Earth oscillates on its axis. And so we've recently gone through a minor pole shift in that respect, or axis shift. But also, because we move in through space and go through locally high and locally lows, these have an effect on the magnetic aspect of the Earth, which is basically the core, the magma. And the core rotates inside the Earth. And this is known from a physics perspective. And we are about to go through a complete change, where magnetic north becomes south and south becomes north, for example, or any variation on that. And we know this happens because we've got physical proof of this as well. So we've got minor change of axis. I think it's about 5 degrees we've moved. We've got the oscillation, or the changing, or the potential to change very soon of the core of the Earth, which changes our magnetic location orientation, and we've got the moving in and out of higher and lower frequencies, and that all affects the weather, basically.
My God, that's a lot.
And it also affects the way we interact with each other, which is another interesting byproduct.
Now, when you're talking about the pole shift, just real quick, if you could clarify on that, because some people talk about that. They're like, oh, it's going to be really, I've heard so many different things, right? So it's going to be really fast pole shift. You won't even notice it. Some are like, nope, it's going to be cataclysmic. What is the pole shift that you are seeing, and how are you seeing this?
Well, we had a shift in the axis. Nobody noticed it, but there may have been a few earthquakes or tremors or changes in frequency. But most people wouldn't have related to it because it's happened quite quickly. And a similar sort of thing, it'll happen quite quickly with the magma rotation. There may be even more extreme weather though with that, because how the magnetic aspect of the Earth changes. That does affect the magnetic aspect of basically the atmosphere. So that'll be more pronounced, to be fair. What will happen? One of the main things that will happen is we'll notice it in navigation technologies. For instance, our GPS systems will become confused, so we'll have to recalibrate those. the issue is whether it happens when we've got lots of planes in the air, which we will do, and there'll be lots of confusion as to, you know, where they are, and they'll have to rely on the old way of navigating for a little bit until all the references to magnetic north, so to speak, have been changed, and they move them around to where the next magnetic north is, or make it magnetic north as a south, and just flip the software. But it's going to be. I'm just trying to work out if it's going to be something that we will experience in our lifetimes. Potentially around 2036, I'm being told. It could flip, and that'll be. It'll cause some problems, some worldwide problems, but we'll get over it, as we always do. And actually, it'll be good, because it will mean that we'll start to work together again properly. We're working together with things like the Ukrainian aspect and the issues that Turkey have had with their earthquakes, for example, and other things. Yeah, we worked together with COVID, but we tend to move on too quickly and forget that, and start to become our own our own selfish selves again. But with this, it'll be a bit more global and a bit more severe. So we'll start to realise that we need to behave ourselves collectively. It'll kick off the start of the Aquarian age, because we'll realise how, well, or should I say, the individuals who are not metaphysical will start to realise that we are potentially an endangered species, and therefore we need to start to behave ourselves, and it will start to kick off the very sort of prenatal aspects of the Aquarian age.
All right. Well, what I hear is 13 years to plan the pole shift party. We have 13 years to plan this party coming up. So we'll want to make sure we have that coordinated. Go ahead, Linda.
So question that has come up with me in a conversation recently, I'd love your opinion on it, that goes with this. Consciousness, does everything have consciousness? It's because it's a living organism, because we have, there are people that say, no, rocks don't have consciousness. No, the earth doesn't have consciousness, and plants don't have consciousness. How does that interact, if it does?
Everything is part of the source, irrespective of its physical or energetic, and even physicality is energetic. It's just that it's low frequency. Therefore, it gives the ability to be observed as being solid, for example. There is a distribution of that part of the source, which is called sentience, and the sentience that we experience is significantly denser in volume and in evolutionary progression than, for instance, the animal sentience, or the plant sentience, or the mineral sentience. And so there's sort of a hierarchy of creation, that when the source created lots of billions and trillions of smaller individualized aspects of its own sentience to populate the half of itself that it compartmentalized, to allow these smaller parts to understand it in more depth and detail. But it actually didn't, shall I say, use its concentration properly, and so there was different levels of sentience created. So we have there's the sentience that we would classify as being capable of incarnating in the earth, in the human type of body, and there's other bodies as well. There's another level of sentience which is in between the human and the animal sentience. They tend to incarnate more in collectives, and some of those are being allowed, well, a lot of them right now are being allowed to incarnate on Earth to backfill for those individuals who've ascended beyond the third frequency and are in the fourth frequency, what the Lord is kind of called the New Earth. And then we've got the animal sentience, which is again another level of sentience, which is not so doesn't have the same volume or the same density of sentience or quality of evolution. And then you've got the plant types, and then you've got the mineral, the earth types. Then you've got basically planetoid and the nebulae and the gases as well. So everything has, or everything is part of the source. Everything has sentience associated with it. It's just the volume of sentience associated with it which differentiates us.
Thank you,
Does
sir.
that make sense at all?
It does. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's been coming up in conversations.
The
light
interesting thing,
conversations.
the interesting thing is that there's a lot of thought process that we have to go through from the mineral through to the plants. We have to evolve from being a plant to go into the animal, and then we have to evolve from being the animal into the next level. Then we have to evolve from that to go into the humanoid level, which is, it's right and wrong. It's for those volumes of sentience that were manifest as being individualized and therefore capable of being plants, for example. That sentience can evolve over time and does evolve over time and can go to the animal level. And the animals can go to the next level. We can jump and go to the human level. But if we were created with the right level of, the right volume of sentience to be able to be individualized and incarnate in the human type of body, then we don't need to be evolving through the other levels because we're already that level, basically. So there's two levels of understanding. One is that we're created at a certain level of sentience, and the other is that those levels of sentience that don't have the same volume of sentience or quality of sentience or even density and therefore the quality of evolutionary progression, they have the potential to progress upwards as well. So there's two levels of understanding, which are both right, but sometimes they're isolated. And there's also, as a result of this, there's lots of belief systems or religious belief systems that say that, if you don't behave yourself, you'll be incarnating as a chicken or an ant or something. Now, from our level of sentience, we do have the capability of incarnating in an animal body, for example, but we wouldn't, because we wouldn't benefit from it, because we're a higher level of sentience and therefore a high level of evolutionary progression as well. So it is unlikely, to the point of zero, that we, in our level of sentience, would incarnate as a cat or a dog, for example, or a horse.
One of the things that brought me to that, thinking about that more, the couple times where I've had animal communication, and it's there, but it's different in a way that it's more emotional, and like the words do transfer over. The dog sitting here looking at my face and seeing my face from the dog's eyes, and really understanding the dog's thoughts are, I could do it. I could rip her face off. And in that thought and seeing it from the dog's eyes, but it was kind of, I was translating the feelings into the words, I think. So for me, it was like the images and the feelings are more, it felt like I was translating.
Yeah. We've limited ourselves by using our vocal cords to communicate with each other, or our hands, for example.
I can't talk without my hands.
Yeah. Animals tend to communicate and do communicate via telepathy or telepathy, a mixture of telepathy and empathic movement.
That's what I say is telepathy. I thought I made it up. I call it telepathy. I thought I made it up. Oh my God, that is so funny. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So they're communicating on a number of different levels. And you have autistic children or autistic adults, and even Down syndrome adults. They also communicate by using telepathy rather than the spoken word, which is so slow. I mean, I can even now, when I'm talking to people or have a lecture, I have to really be careful, because there's that much information coming into my head from wherever it comes from, that speech is too slow for me, and I'm expecting people to understand what I'm conveying or what I want. For example, if I'm talking to somebody who's doing some work on the house, for example, I'm frustrated when they don't understand it straight away, because I'm broadcasting on all the different channels that are required to communicate instantaneously. And the animals do this. So I look at you a bit strange. Why are you speaking to me? Why are you barking at me? or meowing at me, for example. They communicate on all these different levels concurrently, and we do actually when we're in vastly more channels when we disincarnate. But these children with ADHD, for example, the autistic spectrum, they're doing it, and the reason why they get angry is because they get frustrated because we're not broadcasting back. And we don't, or maybe we don't understand what they're trying to convey to us in any way, shape, or form, because they're using what's used in the energetic. But here,
yeah, it's kind of like telepathy is kind of like the base language in terms of being able to communicate between beings. It's like, and everything else is built off of around that. Would you say? Actually, you know what? I want to change the subject because I want to. We have an hour with you left, and I want to make we have to savor this time. So we'll talk about telepathy later over tea when I'm visiting England. What I would like to know is, before we talk about origin, let's talk about the 12 sources, just so we can kind of break this down for people. So we have 12 sources. We have our source is one of them. His name is Keith. No, I don't know who our source is. Let us know who our source is, and that there's 12, and how the 12 come back into the origin, and then to kind of just walk us backwards from the 12 into origin in whatever fashion. I know I just asked you to write a new book, but just give us a little overview on that.
Well, I'll give you a quick summary of how the 12 source centers got created. And basically, the origin was a single volume of sentience that evolved just naturally, like Darwinian evolution, but it was given some assistance by another volume of sentience that gave up its dominance because it saw that the origin was going to be a much more complete level of sentience and able to go further and further than it could. And that was event-based. Event-based had got sentience as well. But when the origin became aware and awake of what it was and started to experiment and things, it decided it wanted to accelerate how it's evolved, and it thought the best way to do this is to reproduce itself. But if you don't know what you are, how can you reproduce yourself? So in effect, those desires to reproduce itself 12 times, for example, didn't work. So it recycled that energy in the sentience and worked on giving sentience to 12 smaller aspects of energy, and gave them a reason to be. What I wanted to do is to experience different things, and how you want to do them. And they're all doing this in different ways. And so I've just basically called them source entity 1 to 12, purely as a function of that was the order in which I contacted them. No other reason. So source entity 1 is our creator, our source, our God, for example. What we call God anyway. But we're all part of it. We're all smaller, individualized units of sentience. Our higher selves or true energetic selves are much larger volumes of sentience than the sentience is occupying these bodies right now. And it created an environment by dividing itself into two and giving one side of itself up to another division of itself, which was sentience, and populating it to allow those smaller individual units of sentience to understand the minute detail. It's a bit like, when we see a rug or a carpet, we see the rug or carpet. We don't see the microscopic aspects of that rug or carpet, or what exists within the pile or within the threads that make the pile. We can't see that level. But a smaller entity would be able to see all of that. It's a bit like ants. If you've ever seen the Ant-Man films, that sort of thing, they can see right down to the quantum level. And so we're experiencing the sub-quantum level basically, and understanding, and we're creating environments, we're creating circumstances to work with those environments, and we're creating circumstances to work with other entities that are in the environment to experience that environment in different ways. And we're really creative. So that's one way in which one of the sources, our particular source entity, is experiencing, learning, and evolving, and sharing this evolution with the origin, because actually they're smaller versions of the origin. And then the other ones, the ones that I've contacted subsequently, are doing it in their own way. I think Source Entity 5 hasn't reproduced itself at all. It's a single volume of sentience and energy, doing it in its own way. It's just experimenting with itself rather than creating smaller versions of itself to experience itself in that way. And so there's lots of different ways in which is happening, which is fantastic, because if everything was being done the same way, then we get no diversity of experience, and therefore the quality of evolution wouldn't be there. So the objective is to, So the objective of all these source entities is to assist the origin to map out and understand the current location of its own sentience. When it's understood that volume of that volume of space, if you want to call it that, it's all going to move into the next volume of space, and that's when our higher selves become source entities, because the next volume of space is so infinitesimally larger than where we are now, that it needs to have a lot more units of sentience of a higher level to be able to experience, learn, and evolve in a reasonable period of time, so to speak.
I wanted to hop in and ask you about the 12 sources, because there's, we have this experience in this continuum of this expression, in this stream of source expression. There's 11 other ones. How are they different? Because, all we know is this. It's like a fish knows water. When you take fish out of water, it's like, what the fuck? So it's like, how do we know what those other universes were like? Are they parallel to this one, or do they feel vastly different? What makes them so unique from this one that there's 12?
Well, they just do it in a different way. It's a bit like, how one person will ride a push bike in one way and somebody else will ride it in a different way, and somebody else won't ride it. Somebody else will scoot it, and somebody else will get a motorbike instead. It's achieving an understanding of the energies that their sentience has been assigned to in a different way. So it's understanding that, and then moving on to another level of energy and understanding that. So in effect, it's almost like a parallel processing of a question or equation, but each of the equations is slightly different, and that's basically what it is. But within all of this, they've also got this potential to create parallel versions or multiple versions, because as soon as there's a juncture where there's a decision to be made, let's go this way or that way, let's experience this, but I want to experience that as well, I'll focus on this way instead, then something called event space, which permeates everything, sees the potential for experience as being another potential to evolve, and therefore duplicates everything. So then there's two that are experiencing going that way rather than going that way, or going to the shops rather than go to the cinema. And so the going to the shops or going to the cinema is, we go to the shops and the cinema concurrently at the same time. So everything is subject to duplication or triplication or quadruplication, etc., as a function of potential juncture for a decision point, or the potential for a decision, or the possibility of a possibility, the potential of the possibility, for example, of a decision or a change, or 2, 3, 4, 6 different ways of experiencing something, and the decision that's made by sentience to experience it. Once there's a decision, then there isn't just the focus on that. The sentience is duplicated, the environment is duplicated, the circumstances are duplicated to experience this one as well.
So then basically,
you've got parallel processing, and you've got parallel processing of the parallel processing.
So it's basically 12 mirrors experiencing different versions, or 12 mirrors is too simplistic. 12 event continuums that are mirroring and exploring similar content in terms of creation? Like, are there 12 Earth, are there 12, like universes that are our universe in each one of those that are mirrors of this? I'm trying to like detect what it looks like.
Think of it like, if we use our source entity and my understanding of the source entity and its structure as an example, and then sort of use that as the framework. Think of it like entities that control 12 different multiverses, and everything within those multiverses is doing something different. think of it like
so compare source 2 multiverse to source 11 multiverse, for example. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because I can only come up with like really banal examples of what that might look like. But like every, but it's like, how would you explain that, or can you? Is it just too beyond?
Well, yeah, I need to read my own books again, to be honest, because I've moved on so far from that. Although I might be coming back to it later in the in this book, Beyond the Origin. It's a way to explain it. Another way to explain it is you've got 12 playgrounds, okay, and each of these playgrounds is out of sight of the other playground, and then you put 12 children in the playground. Each of them will play with the swings or the roundabouts or the slides or whatever's there in a different way in a different time, so they're experiencing the same thing differently.
Okay.
Different combinations. That's the way to think of it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll cap it on that one. I need to read your book, is what that's telling me. Or books.
They're in Beyond the Source Book 1 and Beyond the Source Book 2, and
okay.
That will give the reader an understanding of how the different source entities are dealing with their opportunity to experience, learn, and evolve themselves and press the evolution on concurrently or at the same time in parallel to the origin as well.
Well, then let's hop in.
A question.
Oh, go ahead, Linda.
I have a question on that. Yeah. So pulling that into our existence, we are the big question of why are we here? Do we have a purpose? Is that purpose simply the experience for them? Is it as simple as that, or is it in the evolution?
Well, the reason for us to be here is to experience, learn, and evolve. And to be here in the physical universe at this frequency level is the opportunity to accelerate our evolution through experiencing difficulty or physicality, not being able to operate in the way we normally operate. And so if we experience difficulty, then we have to work our way around it, don't we? For example, if you're driving a car somewhere and your car broke down, and you think, oh, okay, I'll phone the repair services, or I'll phone and I have to phone my the person I was going to visit, that I'm going to be late because the car's broke down. But if your mobile phone didn't work, how would you do it? You find a way, don't you? You have to walk down the freeway or something to one of these phone booths that's there and phone up the services to say, oh, my car's broken down, can you come and pick me up? And then you can, then when the services come, you say, oh, can I borrow your phone? I need to phone such and such to say I'm going to be late or not come at all because my car's broke down. So we have to work with what we've got, which is significantly more difficult to how we normally function. Yeah, how we normally function, we can just create things like that. We can understand how to manipulate anything and create it. We do. Here, we're limited to 5 senses. That's a significant reduction in capability. And our communicative bandwidth is so low that we can't even communicate with our higher self, let alone other entities that are also here or in the energies. So this experiencing difficulty or experiencing significant challenge is how we evolve. So our reason to be here is to experience, learn, and evolve by using, in this instance, a low frequency environment to enable us to augment that evolution progression. But in essence, though, we have to remember that we are individualized units of sentience that are, in essence, source entity sentience. So which is, and the source entities themselves are individualized units of origin sentience. So if you start to go back up the structure, we've got us as smaller aspects of our higher self or true entity self, which is one volume of sentience, and that's a bigger volume of sentience. And that our higher selves or true entity selves is a smaller individualized unit of sentience from source, and the source is a smaller individualized unit of sentience from origin. So we're all origin basically, but because we're individualized, we're capable of thinking individually as well.
Okay.
And in doing that, we want to evolve. The whole point is of evolution, experience, learning, and evolution. And how we do it is up to us. I mean, sometimes we come here and we end up being very rich individuals, or we're great leaders, or we're just the average person, or we're kings, or we're spiritual leaders, or we're the CEO of a massive company, or we become vagrants or criminals. We experience everything to make sure that what our evolutionary progression has got quality to it and it's holistic.
Okay, that brings a question from our audience. Tracy Spencer Boyce asked, and this is in the expansive as we start to explore those our abilities, and we start to tap into that incredible, huge multiverse that we have. Tracy asks, I have this fear remembrance that I will tune in so far away and travel to that place, and then I get lost trying to get back to this when. How do you manage that unnerving inertia?
We have to be grounded. It's one of the things that I teach my students when I'm teaching the traversing the frequencies, which is to teach the structured aspect of what I do, and then also introduce them to formlessness, is to create a visualization process, or even a statement, a mantra that states that I'm grounded.
Oh no, we froze.
But I understand the problem, because it's so compelling to stay where we normally are, to be back in the high frequencies where we understand everything instantaneously, we can go anywhere instantaneously, we can communicate with everything instantaneously. To come back into what's essentially a moving rock is not compelling at all. We don't. So to navigate back to being here is against our natural nature. We want to be free in the frequencies and the higher frequencies. So the only way to do it is to create some way of creating a link between here on the earth and there. And I rather mechanically tell the students to think about having a metal hoop buried deep in the ground, and you have a mountaineering harness on and a rope on that's clipped to this metal hoop buried deep in the ground, and also clipped onto your mountaineering harness. And that rope is always the right length. It grows or it shrinks depending upon how far away or how close to the earth environment you are. But it also links you to the earth, and you can use it as a means of coming back. You can ask the rope to bring you back as well. And that's what I teach them, just to create this ability to know they can come back. And eventually they get to the point where they can just make a statement, I'm grounded, I'm going to come back. And they do. But it's so easy to get lost because it's a natural environment. And coming back to existing a moving rock, which is basically what the human body is not a compelling thing to contemplate. Yeah, I mean, most individuals move out of the body. Their soul moves out of the body when the body's asleep, and they do various different things. They have things to do, or they move around. Most people don't remember it. But how many people?
Uh-oh.
state of the
Oh, he's
chest.
back.
That's because we've come back into the body. We had to sort of almost force ourselves back into the body. Yeah, it's not compelling to be here. It's hard enough being born, but having to come back into it when you know what it's going to be like again and again and again, it's difficult. But yeah, just tell you, or if you can hear it now, just create a link between you and the earth, and then use your intention to be grounded, and you will come back.
I like that we're moving rocks. Jason calls himself a moving hunk a lot, and I guess he does have a bunch of followers. But what I wanted to ask then is, in terms of going into source or origin, rather, I got this little clip here from one of your presentations. I cleverly stole that from one of your videos, so I'd have a reference point, because again, this does get to be so expansive. So I'm just going to read these notes from here, and so we can dive into this. Is that okay? It's my show. I'll do it. All right. The origin is the absolute, the all. Sure. It is the sentient energy, frequency, and dimension. 12 zones, 12 dimensions, 12 frequencies. Each dimension is a triviate. I said that wrong, didn't I? Tritave. Tritave. Three-dimensional. Tritave. New word for me. Three-dimensional subcomponents. Initial self-investigation resulted in experience, knowledge, and evolution. The origin desired acceleration of evolution and created 12 origins equal to self, external to itself. This failed, which you just talked about. The origin created 12 source entities equal but lesser than itself. So that's kind of encapsulates everything you just said. And then what is the work now that you're doing with origin? Because I know one of those shocking things that I read it was that, origin's so big, it has no idea how big it is. So bring us into your relationship with origin and beyond origin and the work you're doing now.
Well, yeah. Well, that text just showed the limitation of what I knew then. Yeah. I mean, basically there's 12 levels. Of which frequency is one, subdimensional component or tritave is another, full dimensions are another level, zones are another level, then there's continuum, that goes up to 12. That's just the first level, the first of the 12 levels. There's then 11 other levels as well that I wasn't aware of until recently, and I now know that this is just structured space, and structured space is microscopically small in comparison to unstructured space or nothingness. And so the book I'm working on now is called Beyond the Origin and Event Space Odyssey, simply because everything is being done through event space, to be able to see effectively the future origin and talk to the future origin who's already moved beyond the confines of structured space. He's gone past the 12th level of the 12th level, so to speak, and he wants to move into, has moved into unstructured space, with structured space being just simply an aberration of nothingness, which is an interesting way to think about it and see. And so really those first levels of understanding are just showing you how my level of understanding has evolved over the last sort of 10 years or so.
But I think it's also reassuring, because I kind of, to echo Linda, when Linda was saying earlier, if I don't get it right, then I'm a fraud. And it's like, we can do this whole thing of, when we're tuning into things, like, well, you're not meant to read the whole book in one sitting. Just because you've read chapters 1 through 12 and there's 24 more chapters in that one book, like, it's valuable for people to know that, like, the terrain that you've covered so far in your exploration, some of it's right, some of it's wrong. Your perceptions are going to change, because you can only see so much from the place that you're at. I was wondering if you talk about, because when you're traveling through origin, you're experiencing this through telepathy. You're talking to origin through telepathy, but you're also feeling it through your body. And you're saying that, like, you're experiencing origin as it's experiencing itself in different time-space events. and those different time space events are not always aware of one another. Would that be accurate?
Yes, and if the sentience has the right level of volume, it can experience all event spaces, so to speak, concurrently, and therefore understand it all concurrently. But in essence, until that level of sentience has been reached, it's sort of compartmentalized within these individualized event spaces, or I think you call them time space events. So when I communicate with the origin that is now, or what I believe is now, so to speak, that's a different origin, because the origin has evolved in one of the other levels I've communicated with it in. So when I'm communicating with it in, for instance, when it's the 6th level within the 9th level, so rather than where we are now, which is in the first couple of levels within the first level, it's evolved a lot, and so it must be struggling to communicate with me, and I'm struggling to communicate with it. But in essence, it is a different version of the origin, because it's moved, has increased in volume, in a way that we can't even consider. And so, and we're part of it. One of the things I understand now is that although we're all individualized now, and then later when we move out of this one, the first of the 12 levels, we move into the second of the 12 levels, our higher selves become source entities. What I've understood is that eventually individuality disappears. We all decide to become one with the origin, and so the origin is everything. So although we've got the potential to be visualized, and we all, everything chooses to be part of this larger volume of sentience. So the origin maintains its individuality, but as a collective of all the smaller levels of individuality that it's created and the source entities have created. And so everything becomes oneness again.
Okay. So go ahead, Jason, hop in.
I hope
Please.
I asked this right. I hope it makes sense. Okay. Is origin then expanding and growing because we are expanding and growing, or are we expanding and growing because origin, or is it a combination of, is it a trickle down, a trickle up, or it's all trickling in every direction at the same time? Does that make sense?
Everything's happening at the same time. So we experience learn and evolve as smaller aspects of our higher self, or our true energetic self. But our true energetic self is also doing other things. So it's experiencing, learning, and evolving. The source entities are also doing something else aside from that. It's their own individualizations of sentience. So our source entity is doing its own thing as well, other than us being inside it doing things, doing its own work. So everything is doing something to evolve. And so there's a collective level of evolutionary progression that is both a function of us individually and a function of us collectively.
I feel like I'm in a master class.
I know it's a lot too. I'm like sucking it in my brain.
So how does, I keep hearing sovereignty, self-sovereignty, self-actualization. So there seems to be this movement of all self-ish versus collective. How does that fit together, or does it?
Well, basically, we're all source, and the sources are all origin. So in essence, if we think of ourselves as being smaller aspects of sentience of the source, we are the source. So we are source evolving, and therefore, if we think of the source entities being smaller aspects of the origin, then all source entities are origin. and so they are origin, and if you bring that back down again, we're therefore smaller aspects of origin. So we are all origin collectively evolving, but doing lots of little jobs in between. So our sovereignty basically is a function of us understanding that actually everything we do isn't for us, it's for us collectively that is the origin.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I always think about that whole thing of when the airplane's plummeting, you have to pull the mask over your face first before you do it for your child. Like, there's a thing in taking care of your own garden first, and then you can help other gardeners take care of their garden, but you have to master your own garden first. And share those fruits from your garden while other people learn how to make better gardens themselves. I wanted to also then, when we're connecting into origin, and you're experiencing what's beyond origin, which when you talk about that, it seems like beyond origin is what we would just call concepts. Like, would you talk about what you when you went past origin, what you encountered and what that is for you now, and how you identify that relationship?
Well, in essence, beyond the origin is really a metaphor. It means beyond the origin as I understand it now, and it's beyond the origin understanding of itself from the event space that I'm communicating with it. So it's a bit like beyond. If I use myself as an example, myself when I'm 90, if I'm still on the planet, will be a different version of Guy, because I've experienced other things, and therefore my knowledge base and my evolutionary base will be different. So that version of me then will be beyond the version of me now, and that's the same with the origin. So going beyond the origin is like going beyond my understanding of the origin and the origin's understanding of itself right now, versus the other version of now, which is what the origin's experienced at the end of its evolutionary cycles, where it's moved beyond physicality, it's moved beyond structured space. So it's in the book, I'm quite regularly saying which version of the origin am I speaking to now, and eventually it says doesn't matter. Just it doesn't matter whether it's the one that you've communicated with at the start of your journey, or the one that is halfway through its evolutionary cycle, or it's the one that has finished moving its way through and is totally occupied all of structured space, and is now contemplating and is occupying unstructured space or nothingness. So from that perspective, it's me sort of understanding and working with the origin in a way that is, rather than thinking it as being lots of different versions of the origin based upon its evolution, and me dipping into this version of the origin and then that version of the origin, I'm just having to work with the origin. And sometimes it's the one that his focus is here now with me, and sometimes his focus is well beyond this particular space and this particular level of evolution, and therefore this particular level of sentience and volume of sentience it's got is much bigger. So from that perspective, it is communicating with me with, shall I say, aspects of itself that from its perspective are much smaller, but from my perspective it's the same. But its level of understanding is different. And so it even refers to some of the things that are well into the future as being in the past. So it's
wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
It's hard work. Yeah, Doctor Who said that.
Yes, exactly. Well, because here's the thing is that it makes me think about Doctor Who and how, like, you're encountering origin, right? And so, like, when because I'm a Doctor Who fan, there was a certain point where I jumped off the ship, but When he found back his home planet again, then to me the cycle is complete. But anyway, so when Doctor Who's, rebirthing into all these different people, and so we get to meet Doctor Who in all of these different timelines that he's in as he's hopping all over the place. And sometimes he's aware of his other selves and sometimes he's not. And I just think about that with you and Origin, as you were, popping in through all of Origin's expressions. There has to be a point where it's like, oh, it's the same guy. Oh, we must know him. It's the same guy. That we must know him, that we're going to we don't have to keep reintroducing ourselves. Because, that's what I would think, is that like you're popping into Doctor Who, into all these different adventures, all these different timelines. Why would he always know you? Why would he always remember you if it's different time space events?
Exactly. I mean, it must be, oh, I remember communicating with that entity countless quadrupillions of Earth years ago.
That's great. Is there a Doctor Who museum in England?
There was. It was in Cardiff. It was part of the TechnoQuest area. It's not. I think they've disassembled it now. But there was a Doctor Who museum. Yeah, definitely.
They need to put that back up. You and I need to go to that together. I think you and I are going to have some adventures. We definitely have a Doctor Who connection point. I wanted to ask, before we talked about karma, we had a question from one of our beautiful people. So let me go back to that question, which I cleverly saved here. This is from Brenda Andres. She asks, in your opinion, Guy, do you think the Earth is really going to split into two separate Earths like Dolores Cannon says it is? So I'm sure you're familiar with the whole ascension scenarios, and there's different, depending on, again, where you're looking at it, from what vantage point, it looks different ways. What's your understanding of New Earth, the Earth splitting into two Earths, or etc.?
It's, well, basically, it's a metaphoric statement. The Earth, as I said previously, is a pan-frequential body. It exists on all of the frequencies associated with the physical universe. So when Dolores was talking about us moving into the new Earth, she was talking about those individuals who would, through their own hard work of being of service, of being spiritual, metaphysical, raise their frequencies whilst in this incarnation and move into the next frequency level. And so the content of the Earth on the next frequency level is different to what we've got here now. Sometimes it includes buildings, for example, or different things that are capable of being in that next frequency. But by and large, there's a lot more there. There are other individuals there. So the new Earth is actually the Earth on a higher frequency, but there's more than one new Earth based upon that. There's another 8 new Earths on top of that. So we have 9 new Earths in total. But those new Earths are just basically the Earth on a different frequency level. And if we move into that other frequency level, we move out of the perceptual range of those individuals who stay on the first Earth. So when we move into the next frequency level, the first new Earth, so to speak, we're not seen by these people here because we're a higher frequency. Although we can see them, and we can also see those individuals who are on the 4th frequency level, but we can't see those who are on the 5th frequency level. So it's to incarnate or in another incarnation. So there is more than one new Earth, but actually those Earths are just the Earth in a higher, the function of the Earth and the content associated with the Earth that is represented on this higher frequency.
Great. I think that's fantastic. And I think that people need to know, again, it's all about frequency, and to not get caught into the narrative of what's happening, but plug into your experience of what's your connection with Gaia, what's your connection with Source, what's your connection with your body, your own intuition. Thank you, Guy. I wanted to make sure we had time for karma as well, talking about karma a little bit, because Linda had many synchronicities on that conversation this week. Was there anything else that, Jason, you wanted to ask before we shift gears?
Yeah, I did want to ask a question based off of the last question. So, and you may have said it and I just didn't hear it. So let's say 3D Jason is shifting into 4D. Great, I'm going to 4D Earth instead of 3D. Is that meaning that I'm unlocking it in my next incarnation, or am I going to wake up overnight and be in a different level? And if so, do I wake up conscious there of like, holy shit, I am now in a new place. Like I'm in the new frequency. I upshifted. Or is it as if I've always been there?
Basically, you will gradually go into it, and so therefore the change in landscape, because it's a gradual change, becomes normalized to you. So you would experience things that the person next door who stands next to you wouldn't, for example. And so you might even find that they don't see you, they don't perceive that you're there, because what we see out of physical eyes is a combination of what's seen with the third eye on the frequency that we've focused on, plus the physical eyes. So you get normalized to seeing more content, to seeing people in a different way, to having people respond in a more loving and caring way compared to being here. So it's not just a case of you'll just suddenly go there, you gradually go there. And so you get normalized to it. And then what you'll find is that the people that you used to interact with on the lower frequency level, you start to move away from, and they will suddenly think, well, you know, Jason's just disappeared. Or, you know, this is how we lose contact with people. That all of a sudden we just don't see them anymore because they've moved out. They've either physically moved, or they're frequentially moved up out of the perceptual range of those who've stayed on a lower frequency. So you just get used to it slowly, because you gradually get interaction with those different things on that frequency level. And then when you're there all the time, you just think that's where you are. Most individuals, unless they start to realize, will become more capable of understanding. They'll get more communicative bandwidth. But even with this higher communicative bandwidth, a number of individuals might actually think that they're still in the third frequency. We're actually in the fourth, because they all have got used to communicating with people who are on the fourth frequency and interacting with the environment that's part of the earth on the fourth frequency. So it's a gradual thing.
I love that. I love that. It's so gentle. I think we look for these dramatic changes, but we've got enough drama, so this could be a nice gradual shift over. And we just realized all of a sudden we're there one day. We're like, no more assholes. We're all being loving and supportive to each other.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. I mean, once we start to observe our environment and how we interact with people, you start to see that actually most of the individuals we interact with are like you guys. And we're not interacting with people who are, criminal types or selfish, or, or trying to be number one all the time, or be rich or famous or materialistic. You start to communicate with all the time those people who are the same level as you. And then you start to look around and think, well, actually, everybody else is in the background because this is the level I'm on. And these are the individuals who are also on this level. And we have a completely different outlook about how we interact with each other and how we interact with the environment, and how we create circumstances that are more favorable circumstances rather than catastrophic circumstances.
I have to say, it's so wild, and we'll switch gears here. But since I've been in Omaha, like I'm living near Omaha, but since I come here every day to work, people are so friendly. I can literally start talking to anybody. It's like this welcome home vibe, and it's like when you're where you're supposed to be, the dials click, and I feel so welcomed. I've met just people chatting. I can talk to them about anything, and people are just like open and friendly, and it's such a click. And I just think that parallels what you're talking about in terms of all of a sudden things are lining up, and it's you're like, that's I'm just well received.
That's what. Yeah. That's one of the ways in which you can tell that you've moved up a frequency level, or a part of a frequency level.
And it's also, I mean, for me, I can absolutely attest to living the same environment with someone and having two absolutely diametrically opposed perceptions of what that is that's happening in that environment. And our perception of how things are happening. One can see it as catastrophe, and the other can see like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have all of these different things happening. And, being fear-based or not fear-based, I think is a big part of that.
Et voila,
that's
et voila.
The separation I think I'm seeing is we're either moving more towards fear or more towards trust and love.
Yes.
Yeah. And rather than things being a catastrophe, we start to see things as an opportunity for evolution.
Exactly.
There's a challenge here. Let's deal with it. And we do it in a detached way rather than a sort of
reactionary.
Reactionary way. Yeah.
Right. With curiosity and I want, and also
right.
think, I brought this into myself. I wonder why. I brought this opportunity for growth. Wow. And be able to be in that presence of mind versus the victimhood of everything's being done to me.
On that, Linda, would you want to lead the conversation about karma? I'm going to step away for just a moment, but you had some experiences and I'll be back in just a minute.
Yeah. Karma has come up in probably 4 different conversations this week. And we were mentioning it earlier of how, what is your understanding of karma? Because I've heard 4 different versions of what people think karma is. And I'm really curious what your perception is.
Well, karma is really a way of describing addictions to low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions, and the consequences associated with those low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions. So it's and by that it's an addiction to being here as well. So we can accrue karma as well. We can accrue karmic debt, which means that we need to experience the opposite of something we've done. If we've done something detrimental to somebody, we need to experience that in return. If we experience something positive from somebody, we would give that back as well. So that's positive karma. So really, there's a karma can be identified in a number of different ways. There's materialism-based karma, where we want to have physical things around us to support us. There's status-based karma, where we want to be the top dog. There's karma that we accrue as a function of how we interact with individuals. There's karma within ourselves in terms of how we interact with the environment and individuals. We have to do it again to be able to perfect it. And there's a need to experience the physical environment again because we didn't do it particularly well, for example, or we want to improve upon it from a previous incarnation. So really, it's all about how we think, behave, and act, interact with others, but on top of that, there's the another part of the addiction part of karma is sensory addiction as well, where we want to experience, for example, adrenaline rushes. We want to experience extreme sports. We want to experience bodily functions, such as with sex. We want to experience being under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or we want to experience various different foods, for example. And we get addicted to certain foods. We like chocolate, for example. We like alcohol. We like various different drugs. These sorts of things. And so, in essence, these are also a function of the karma, because anything that's an addiction that makes us want to experience it again can also be carried across to the next incarnation, where we think, I'll come back to Earth again, or I'll be able to experience chocolate again, or I'll be able to experience Indian food again, or Turkish food again, for example, or I want to experience being in a male body or a female body again, because I enjoyed the sensory responses to those bodies when I was interacting with them, with either the same sex or opposite sex, for example. So we get addicted to being here, to wanting to be here. So not only is it about how we interact with ourselves and how we've interacted in previous incarnations and how we interact with others, it's about how we interact with the environments while we're here. Now, once we've removed karma, we've basically removed our addiction to being here, and we've managed to create a condition where we can navigate through our incarnation without becoming addicted to any sensory gratification, any status levels, any materialistic conditions, or any feelings of superiority. We can just be here and be neutral, so to speak. And we can experience everything in a neutral way and not think of it as being bad or good. It just is, and we just deal with it. And once we've done that, once we've mastered the ability to be here without being addicted to it or attracted to it or desire it, then we've mastered incarnation, and we don't need to incarnate again. So it's a mixture of all those different things together, and not just one thing like cause and effect, for example. It's literally addictive thoughts, behaviors, and actions associated with low frequency existence.
And all that comes from disconnection from source. I mean, anytime, from my experiences of, like the Presence Process, which is a really great book by Michael Brown, it's about becoming present. And it's like, the more that you become present, the more addiction reveals itself as a wound of disconnection from source, from yourself, from love. And it's why people who can have like ayahuasca, sort of like who've had addictive personalities, can go experience something like ayahuasca, resolve their wound, their creation wound, their source wound, and from that, then afterwards they could, if they wanted to have a drink, or if they wanted to have this or that, they could have that, and because their addiction's no longer there anymore, and because the core wound is no longer there, which is disconnection from source. So basically, it's source experimenting with feeling lost and alone and rejected and hurt, but kind of has gotten lost in that dream, and now that it's like, that's my sense of it, is like, hey, that was a great dream. We had it. We're done. We're moving on. We've got other things to do. We're pulling out of the sandbox to create a new castle someplace else.
Yeah, that's another way of saying it. Yeah. So in essence, it's the whole point of being here is to master being here. Other than experiencing, learning, and evolving, the evolutionary side is mastering being here. And once we've mastered it, we don't need to be here again. And this is where the word ascended master comes from. They ascend into up the frequencies because they've mastered incarnation, and therefore don't need to incarnate.
Except for people like you who are ascended masters and decide to come back and help us out and open your wisdom to the planet.
We're all masters.
If we get bored.
If we're here helping others to understand, then we're all sort of masters of masters of a certain level. But we are choosing to be here and not ascend, not moving up to the next level, because we are choosing to help others go to the next level, which is, so we're being of service to other people.
Yes, Linda? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things that come to mind. It's like, do I go down this path or do I go down that path? So I'll go down the path of the angst I'm hearing in people of why do I keep going? I know my heart, I know in my mind, I'm creating this, or there's something that's not resolved. I see it, I feel it. I'm internalized, I've done all this work, and yet it keeps showing up. Do I have this karmic thing that I'm dealing with? How do I deal with that?
We have to analyze how we responded to that thing keeps coming back at us. And if he's coming back at us, we haven't dealt with it properly. And that's the thing to notice. So we have to be detached and not take it personally, and say, okay, what am I doing wrong? What aren't I doing right? So what? Yeah, because if I was doing it right, this wouldn't be coming back. I wouldn't be experiencing it again, and it usually comes back harder as well. And for instance, in an exam, we have to answer the question right, don't we? And if we get it wrong, we get it wrong. Well, this is basically what it is. We're not answering the karmic question or dealing with the karmic response correctly to delete or evaporate that karma.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, so one of the things I've brought up is opening the possibility of, instead of asking why you keep doing something wrong, because this is a conversation I had, stop asking what you're doing wrong, because that in itself is creating the situation, because you're stating you're doing it wrong. You're bringing that back into the now. Every time you do that, you're actualizing that into the now versus what else is possible, and putting your attention into the intention, putting your attention into the intention of
and
what
also
you're trying to create.
that black and white thinking, right, Linda, where it's like, is it right, is it wrong, or it can be curious, you know? And if you're curious, then all of a sudden you've got some more leverage versus I got to get it right to end this karma so God will love me, I'll stop being a bad person. Like, what, you know, whatever story that's fueling the anxiety, it's no, get curious. I like that, Linda.
I mean, rather than saying what am I doing wrong, really should be the thought process we should go down is, how can I do this differently?
Yes.
And therefore experience it in a different way. whether it's something we need to react to, or or some reaction we're trying to get. You know, how can I do this differently? And therefore, you know, or have a desire to experience it in a different way, or react in a different way. Those are the things. So it's not right or wrong. It's you know, maybe there's a different way of experiencing this, or a different way to respond to this.
And I think for me also, it's the illusion of separation, that right and wrong feeling is this illusion of separation that we have, allowing versus I have connection, I am connection, I am love, I am all these things. Therefore, I can detach myself from this illusion that I'm not enough, that I'm not doing it right, and shift into this connectedness that becomes allowing and openness. Does that make sense? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's called accepting the self, accepting ourselves, and recognizing that everything we do is good enough. Sometimes we can do it again in a different way to get depth of experience, or you know, and maybe do it 2 or 3 times to get depth of experience. For instance, you might want to travel from one city to another. First, you might fly. Then you might think, oh, okay, I'll drive a car next time. Next time you think, oh, I'll go on the bus next time, or train next time, or use a motorbike, or a pedal cycle. Just because you're doing it again doesn't mean you've done it wrong. It means you're getting depth of experience. So as long as we understand that whatever we do is okay, it's okay in Source's eyes, if Source had eyes, it's okay with Source because we're experiencing it, then we start to move out of this I'm not good enough to I am good enough. And I'm doing everything in a way that is accruing evolution. But maybe I want to experience this again in a different way.
I have a trifold mirror in my cabinet in my bathroom, and the first one says I am enough, and the second one says, I've written it on the mirror. The second one says I am loved, and the third one says I am love. And it's just as I've gone through this to remember the progression.
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So if everything is okay, right, in the eyes of origin, source, whatever we're calling it, then why is there karma for our choices if everything is okay? Because karma sounds like a judgment, right? But if everything's okay, is it self-imposed?
Like,
yeah, but basically everything's okay because it is really, it is self-imposed to a certain extent, but it's self-imposed thing. We come back here to decide to do the right thing, and the right thing is to understand and work with a higher level of interaction with people or circumstances or the environment. So although we can do anything we want to, and it's okay because it creates a level of evolutionary progression or experience, allows us to experience, learn, and evolve. In essence, there's always an optimal way to experience, and as a result of that, it's up to us to choose that ultimate way. And so it's all about choice at the end of the day. We can be a criminal or we can be a saint, and both provide a level of evolution progression, although we classify one as being good and one as being bad. But at the end of the day, if we start to realize who and what we are, and we understand that we're individualized units of source, then we will choose the higher road, the higher interaction, and therefore there won't be any so-called good or bad. There will just be interaction instead. And so when we get to that point, we won't be accruing karma, because we will start to become neutralized to the accrual of this is good, this is bad, I'll need to experience this again to do it properly, because we'll just be doing it instead, and we'll be doing it with understanding as well. That's the main thing. We'll be doing things with understanding rather than with our eyes open, rather than no understanding and our eyes closed.
So with that understanding, we have an understandable desire to have more ease in our life and our process in this. And sometimes I know it happened with when I followed and did everything I thought that I was supposed to do, and got smacked down by the living way, the life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's nice. Bam. And blindsided by it. And I'm seeing that with people. It's like, I'm following how is it because I'm just not seeing the right path? Is it that I'm not, again, it's that, am I not doing something right? When I look back, it was 100% right. It answered everything I needed to know. But when that fear comes in of just living, of being supported financially, how do you recommend people deal with that dichotomy of trying to express themselves fully in this life and deal with the financial piece that's very real as well?
Well, we all live in the grace of God, so to speak, and doing this sort of work we definitely do, because God provides just enough. So that's the thing to recognize. But more importantly, the way to move forwards is not to be reactionary or to provide answers to questions too quickly. It's always to have a considered approach. Everything we do, rather than instantly dealing with it, we should have a considered approach. We should have give ourselves time to consider it, or have a very short meditation on what we're doing. And that way we'll always create the right direction forwards. And that's what I do. Some people find it annoying, but I don't answer straight away, because I'm analyzing the question, and I'm looking at what they want to get at, what the answer they want, And I'm also looking at what is the karma-free way of answering the question, because sometimes the answer to a question can create a response from somebody which is not what I would consider to be a neutral response. They may take offense to it, for example. So I start to work in a way which is neutral, which is based upon a considered way of responding. And that may mean that you give yourself 10 seconds or more to answer somebody's question if they want to have an answer there and then. Or it may be you say, actually, I can't answer that now. I need to think about it, and I'll come back to you later. And that gives you time to meditate on it and understand the higher thought process or bigger picture as to why that individual is behaving in that way, or why they've asked that particular question, or why they need that sort of help, or why they are interacting with us in a particular emotionally linked in with it. Just allow it to be what it is and detach from it, and then deal with it as if it's it's teeth in the morning. We create a condition where we consider what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and respond in a considered way as well. And that creates no karma at all.
And I'll also hop.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I'd also hop in on that and say that, like Linda was saying, she followed her path. She did all the things she was supposed to do. It didn't look the way she wanted it to. I've done the same thing where it's like, I'm surrendering to this path. I'm surrendering to this flow. I'm surrendering to my guidance.
Yeah. I mean,
do I get to dictate how it looks? Yeah. No, I don't get to dictate that. I get to experience my surrender and what they're providing to me within the surrender. And it doesn't look how I would predict, but it's the adventure that's fulfilling the soul. And that's what we're here to do, is fulfill our souls, our missions. And on that, sir, we're running over time. I know we started a little late, but I wanted to ask you, what were your closing and final thoughts for our audience, from your heart to ours?
Well, the way of navigating through our incarnation is to actually be considerate, to be thoughtful, to be caring, and to work in a way where we're not being attached to the words that certain people or people convey to us. So rather than being upset by something or joyous about something, we consider what's happening. And we respond in the way that we would like to be responded to, and that is what Jesus said. Yeah, basically, you work with somebody, and you deal with them in the way that you would want to be dealt with yourself, and that's it. And that is the way forwards. Always deal with somebody how you would want them to deal with you.
Golden rule really is golden. Linda, do you have a final thought? Did you want to say? I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. I was trying to get us to get to the end point.
No,
Did you have
this is good. This is good. This is a great place to leave it.
I was being considerate.
Seek in this world. That's my thought. Be the love you seek in this world.
Amen to that. All right. Well, Linda, I'm going to give you the floor here. Would you please start our gratitudes?
Absolutely. As always, you guys are amazing and ask the best questions. And Jason, my guy, you ask the best questions also. I love when you're so quiet and you're contemplating, and then bam, you ask those amazing questions. Thank you. I love that we had this great conversation and support on the side. Please remember to like us, share us, hit that subscribe button so you're notified of our upcoming shows, and join us in Facebook group if you haven't. Check out the links below. And yes, Guy is taking clients, so you can do sessions with him as well. And so check those links below as well. And with that, Kat, what's happening next week?
Well, yeah, just so you know, Guy does sessions and it's like they're like around $100 for private sessions with Guy, which is insane. So yes, please go check him out. I mean, or Beyond Origin sessions for $100. Come on, what's happening right now? Talk about going beyond. So well, here's the thing. Next week, because I have been so much transition, I thought maybe we could do a group reading if Jason and Linda would like to do group readings. That's what we did last time after we saw a guy. So we'll do a little deja vu and do group readings next week for everybody. Does that sound good? I'll throw it on the live stream and
100%.
see if it. Okay, great.
You guys
great.
want us to do them? Thumbs up, okay?
Yeah. Oh, good job, Linda. Good job. All right. With that, thank you so much, Guy. What an absolute like masterclass, like Linda was saying, just huge. We'll have you back on for sure. I think this is gonna be hopefully an ongoing love affair between us and you. So thank you, Miss Linda. Again, you're just a chat host goddess, and we appreciate you so much for just keeping that love going. Jason, you're just pretty to look at. So thanks for showing up. Appreciate it, man. We'll see you all next week. Thank you so much. Blessings. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and follow that golden rule. We love you all. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.